Well, US President Donald Trump unveiled sweeping reciprocal tariffs, announcing baseline 10% duties on all imports and much higher rates for some nations. In fact, Trump singled out major US partners for imposing trade barriers he deems unfair, with India and the European Union facing 26% and 20% tariffs respectively. Trump said, they do it to us and we do it to them. In fact, he announced a staggering 34% tariff on goods from China in his Liberation Day speech, railing against foreign cheaters and foreign scavengers. The US president said the US will charge an import duty of 26% on India and 34% on China. And speaking about India, Donald Trump described tariffs by New Delhi as very, very tough. He went on to say that their prime minister, as in Prime Minister Modi, just left the US. He's a great friend of mine, but he said to him that you're a great friend, but you've not been treating us right. In fact, to quote him, he said, India charges us 52%, so we will charge them half of that, which is 26%. But this announcement represents the largest upheaval in American trade policy in decades. US tariffs will approach levels not seen since the 1930s, as some experts argue. In fact, for further clarity on what's happening and how the world will react and the ripple effects, we'll go across to Daniel Block in just a moment, but listen in to what Donald Trump had to say.
Tariffs give our country protection against those that would do us economic harm, and many people were looking to do us economic harm. Maybe not so obviously, but they were doing tremendous economic harm. But even more importantly, they will give us growth. These tariffs are going to give us growth like you haven't seen before, and it'll be something very special.
And joining us live from New York at the moment, Daniel Block, who's a senior editor of Foreign Affairs and also a contributing editor at the Washington Monthly. Daniel, as always, thanks so much for making time for us. What a day it's been. But more tariffs equal more anxiety and uncertainty for American businesses and consumers. So would you call these tariffs a short-sighted plan?
I mean, with the caveat that I'm not a trained economist, I would. That seems to be the consensus among trained economists. And it also just seems to make a certain amount of logical sense. And for many reasons. One, to pick up on what you said, is uncertainty for American businesses and for global businesses. So for a while, one of the things that American presidents had tried to do, including Trump during his first term, is to get companies to leave China and to make their manufacturing lines, to move them to other countries, including India or Vietnam. And many countries did that, many companies did that. They started to move their supply lines over. And now suddenly those countries are getting hit by tariffs as well. So if you're a business, you don't have many good options. You're not quite sure what's going to happen next, where your supply chains are going to be safe. And in addition to that, there was no real sense of how major the tariffs were going to be until Trump announced them today. So companies are scrambling. They don't really know. They don't know what's going to happen next. The whole process has been quite opaque. So yeah, just tremendous uncertainty.
Right. In fact, Daniel, just hold on. We have another bite of Donald Trump lined up for our viewers. Listen in to what the US president had to say regarding these new policies.
I think you're going to remember today it's going to be a free nation that we're dealing with. We're going to have a very free and beautiful nation. It's going to be Liberation Day in America, and it's going to be a day that hopefully you're going to look back in years to come and you're going to say, you know, he was right. This has turned out to be one of the most important days in the history of our country.
Right, Daniel. So the reciprocal tariffs that Trump's levied, they will give the United States the highest tariff rates of any industrialized country, is what we're given to understand. And it's not even close to what the US president is saying, is what many experts warn. People say that now the US president is risking a recession. Is that what you're picking up on? What are experts saying on ground zero?
That's exactly what we're hearing. That the risk of a recession has gone up significantly. Right. And not just a recession, but the risk of inflation. There's a kind of nightmare scenario that these tariffs could push the United States into, of what's called stagflation, where the economy is stagnant or contracting. So you either have a recession or almost no growth. And at the same time, you have rising prices. And this is the last time this really happened in the United States was in the 1970s into the 1980s. And it's very difficult to get out of because the normal tools of monetary policy and stimuli that you would use become kind of, if not ineffective, they exacerbate one problem in order to solve the other. So for example, the Federal Reserve, which is the United States' central bank, could hike interest rates if we have high levels of inflation. But if the economy is contracting, if jobs are going away, if we're having a recession, that will add fuel to that fire.
Indeed. In fact, some say for Trump, tariffs are not so much a negotiating tactic as a policy, a new revenue stream, and a made in the USA commitment. But what are people on ground zero saying? What have the initial reactions been from the opponents?
I mean, Democrats have been very critical. They argue kind of what economists have been saying, that this will produce inflation, it will slow economic growth. And I think just generally a sense that if your goal is to get more revenue for the United States government, this is not the right way to do it. The main thing that tariffs do in order to generate more revenue is they effectively act as a sales tax on Americans because companies that are paying those tariffs will pass on the increased costs to American consumers in the form of higher prices. And sales taxes tend to be quite regressive as far as taxes go, because if you're a wealthy person, you can afford to pay more. But if you're a poor person, you can't.